I thought this way until the summer of 1981, when I was stationed near Rome, Ohio, and learned that some nightmares don't need war to exist. My name is Sergeant James Morrison. I've served in places most people can't find on a map, seen things that still wake me up at 3 a.m. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on that farm outside Rome. What started as a routine security check turned into something that defied every piece of training I'd ever received. And if you're watching this thinking I'm about to tell you some made-up ghost story, I need you to understand something. Every word of what I'm about to say is documented. Photos exist. Reports were filed. Witnesses saw it. And 40 years later, no one has been able to explain any of it. It began in early June. I was assigned to a small operations unit tasked with monitoring unusual activity near a restricted military zone. The area around Rome was mostly farmland, quiet communities, people who kept to themselves. Our job was simple: make sure nothing compromised the perimeter, check in with locals, file reports, standard protocol. But that summer, the reports started coming in differently. Livestock deaths, strange lights over the trees, locals refusing to go near certain parts of the woods. Command told us to investigate, keep it low profile, and figure out what was causing the disturbances. That's how I met the family. I won't use their real names, but I'll call the father Mr. Harrison. He owned a small farm about 3 miles from the military perimeter. Raised chickens, kept a few horses, lived a simple life with his wife and 2 teenage sons. When I knocked on his door that first afternoon, he opened it slowly, eyes tired, face drawn. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "You hear about the noise?" he asked before I even said a word. I told him I was. He nodded, stepped aside, and let me in. The house smelled like coffee and gun oil. A shotgun leaned against the wall near the door. Another one sat on the kitchen table. His wife stood at the stove, barely looking up when I entered. Their sons sat on the couch, staring at nothing. The whole place felt wrong, tense, like everyone was holding their breath. Harrison didn't waste time. He walked me to the back window and pointed toward the tree line. "Started about 3 weeks ago," he said. "Found a deer torn apart near the fence. Not eaten, just destroyed. Then feed bags got shredded. Animals started disappearing. Chickens, ducks, even one of the horses came back bleeding." He paused, jaw tight. Then the lights showed up. I asked him what kind of lights. He shook his head. "Not like anything I've seen." "They hover above the trees, red, sometimes blue. They move slow, like they're searching for something. And when they're out there, the animals go crazy. Dogs won't stop barking. Chickens won't come out of the coop. Even the damn crickets stop making noise." I wrote it down, asked a few more questions, kept my tone neutral. Honestly, I thought it was poachers, or maybe some kids messing around. But Harrison's face told a different story. This wasn't a man trying to get attention. This was a man trying to protect his family from something he didn't understand. Then his youngest son spoke up from the couch. "It looked at me," he said quietly. "Through my window. I woke up, and it was just standing there, breathing on the glass." The room went silent. Harrison's wife turned off the stove. I asked the kid what he saw. He swallowed hard, hands trembling. Big, dark. Eyes were red, like they glowed. It didn't blink, just stared at me until I screamed, and then it was gone. I looked at Harrison. He nodded. "We found prints under the window the next morning. Deep ones. Too big for a bear, too human-shaped to be anything else." That's when I knew this wasn't going to be a simple report. I told Harrison I'd come back with my team, set up some equipment, and see what we could find. He thanked me, but there was no relief in his voice, just exhaustion. As I walked back to my Jeep, I glanced at the tree line. It was broad daylight, sun high, birds singing. Everything looked normal. But the hair on the back of my neck stood up anyway. I radioed Lieutenant Parker on the way back to base, told him what I'd heard. He listened quietly, then said, "You think it's real, or are they just spooked?" I didn't answer right away. Finally, I said, "I think something's out there. Whether it's what they think it is, that's what we need to find out." Parker agreed. 2 days later, we returned to the farm with Private Collins, a young soldier fresh out of training, and Dr. Rachel Foster, a civilian researcher who specialized in wildlife behavior. Command wanted documentation, so they sent her along. She was skeptical from the start. I could tell she had that look scientists get when they think they're about to debunk a local legend. But she brought her cameras, her tape recorders, and her notebooks. And she said she'd stay as long as it took. We arrived just before sunset. The farm looked peaceful. Chickens pecked at the dirt. The wind moved through the grass. Everything seemed fine. But Harrison met us at the door with that same exhausted look. "It's quiet during the day," he said. "Night's when it starts." We set up camp on the porch. Collins positioned motion detectors near the barn and along the fence line. Dr. Foster placed audio recorders in the trees, hoping to catch any unusual sounds. I kept my rifle close, loaded, safety off. Parker stood near the door, scanning the field with binoculars. We waited. The first hour was uneventful. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky turned a deep orange, then purple, then black. The temperature dropped fast. The crickets started their usual song, loud and rhythmic. Harrison's dog, a big German shepherd, lay on the porch beside me, ears twitching at every sound. Everything felt normal. But then, around 9 p.m., the crickets stopped. All at once, like someone flipped a switch. Collins looked at me. "That's not normal, right?" I shook my head. In the field, you learn to trust the animals. When they go quiet, there's a reason. I stood up, rifle in hand, and scanned the tree line. Nothing, just darkness. But the air felt different. Heavier, charged, like the moment before a lightning strike. Then the dog growled, low, deep, guttural. Its body went stiff, eyes locked on the woods. Dr. Foster grabbed her camera, pointing it toward the trees. Parker raised his binoculars, and that's when we saw them. 2 red lights, faint at first, flickering between the branches. They hovered about 8 feet off the ground, moving slowly from left to right. No sound, no rustling leaves, just those 2 glowing eyes, watching us. Collins whispered, "What the hell is that?" No one answered. We just stared. The light stayed there for maybe 30 seconds, then blinked out. Gone. The dog stopped growling. The crickets started again. Everything went back to normal. But none of us moved. Dr. Foster checked her camera. "I got it," she said, voice shaking. "I got it on film." Parker lowered his binoculars. "That wasn't an animal." I didn't respond. I was still watching the tree line, waiting for those lights to come back. But they didn't. Not that night. We stayed until dawn, but nothing else happened. When the sun came up, we packed our gear and told Harrison we'd be back. He nodded, said he appreciated it, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew what we'd seen, and he knew it wasn't over. Back at base, Dr. Foster developed the photos. The image was blurry, but you could see them. 2 distinct red glows, unnatural. Too bright to be reflected light. She had no explanation. Neither did Parker. Command reviewed the report and told us to continue monitoring. They didn't say what they thought it was. They just said, "Keep watching." We returned to the farm 3 nights later. This time we brought more equipment: thermal cameras, night vision goggles, motion-activated floodlights. If something was out there, we were going to see it. Harrison seemed relieved to have us back, but his son stayed inside. His wife barely spoke. The whole family looked like they were on the edge of breaking. We set up faster this time. Collins positioned the thermal camera facing the woods. Dr. Foster placed microphones near the barn. Parker took position on the roof with night vision. I stayed on the porch with Harrison, rifle ready. The dog refused to leave my side. The sun set, darkness fell, and just like before, around 9 p.m., the crickets stopped. This time, the lights appeared faster. 4 of them, bright red, hovering in a line just inside the tree line. They didn't move. They just watched. The thermal camera picked up nothing. No heat signature, no body, just empty air where those lights should be. Parker's voice crackled through the radio. "I've got visual." 4 distinct sources, no heat, no movement. They're just floating. Dr. Foster whispered, "That's impossible." Then the lights started moving, slowly at first, drifting closer to the fence. The dog started barking, loud and frantic. Harrison gripped his shotgun. I raised my rifle, finger near the trigger. The lights stopped about 50 yards from the house, still in a perfect line. And then, from somewhere deep in the woods, we heard it. A scream, long, high-pitched, and sharp enough to make your chest tighten. It echoed across the valley, rolling through the trees like a warning. The lights blinked out. Silence. Then, heavy footsteps, not running, walking, slow, deliberate, crunching through the underbrush. Collins yelled, "Something's moving! Southeast corner!" I swung the rifle toward the sound. The night vision showed movement, large, bipedal, stepping through the trees. It stopped at the edge of the clearing just outside the fence. The thermal camera still showed nothing, but I could see it. A shape, tall, broad, covered in dark fur or hair, and then it turned toward us. 2 red eyes flared to life, brighter than before, burning. It stood there, motionless, staring directly at me. I could feel it, the weight of its gaze, the intelligence behind those eyes. This wasn't an animal. This was something else. Harrison fired his shotgun into the air. The blast echoed through the night. The creature flinched, stepped back, and then let out another scream. This one was deeper, angrier. It reverberated in my chest, shook the windows, made the dog yelp and run inside. And then, without warning, the creature turned and walked back into the woods. Not scrambling, not running, just walking, calm, controlled. We stood there for a long time, breathing hard, weapons raised, waiting for it to come back. But it didn't. The crickets started again. The air felt normal. It was like nothing had happened, except we all saw it. We all heard it. And the thermal camera recorded nothing. Dr. Foster sat down hard, hands shaking. "That's not possible," she kept saying. "That's not possible." Parker climbed down from the roof, face pale. "We need to call this in." I nodded. But I already knew what would happen. Command would review the footage, see the lights, hear the screams, and then file it away. Because what were they supposed to do? Admit that something unexplainable was out there? That's not how the military works. We stayed until morning. The family didn't sleep. Neither did we. When the sun came up, we searched the area where the creature had stood. Deep prints in the dirt. Wide, humanoid, 5-toed, pressed deep into the ground like whatever made them weighed hundreds of pounds. But they stopped 20 feet into the field. No trail, no continuation, just ended. Like it had vanished mid-step. Dr. Foster took photos, measurements, soil samples, but none of it made sense. "These prints," she said quietly, "they're too heavy to be human. Too shaped to be an ape. And they just stop. That's not how biology works." Parker looked at me. "What do we tell command?" I stared at the empty field. "We tell them the truth. Something's out here, and we don't know what it is." That was the end of the first week. But it wasn't the end of the story. The lights kept coming back. The creature kept watching. And over the next several weeks, things got worse, much worse, because whatever was out there in those woods wasn't just observing us. Command didn't believe us at first. How could they? We filed a report claiming we'd seen a bipedal creature with glowing red eyes that left footprints but no thermal signature. On paper, it sounded insane. But the photos were real. The audio recordings were real. And the fear in that family's eyes was real. So command did what the military always does when something doesn't fit the manual. They sent more people. 2 days later, we returned to the farm with a full team, 6 soldiers, 3 researchers, and enough equipment to monitor a war zone. If something was out there, we were going to document every second of it. Lieutenant Parker took charge of operations. Dr. Foster brought 2 colleagues, Dr. Brennan, a physicist, and Dr. Hayes, a cryptozoologist who'd spent years studying unknown species. I stayed close to the family, making sure they felt protected. Collins and the others set up a perimeter around the property. Harrison met us at the door, looking worse than before. His hands shook when he poured coffee. His wife stayed in the bedroom with the boys. He told us the lights had come back every night since we left. Sometimes just watching from the trees. Other times moving closer, circling the house. The animals were going wild. 2 more chickens disappeared. The dog refused to go outside after dark. And the screams, he said those screams were getting louder. "It's like it knows we're afraid," Harrison said quietly. "Like it's feeding off it." Dr. Hayes leaned forward. "Have you tried communicating with it?" Harrison stared at him. "Communicating? You think that thing wants to talk?" Hayes shrugged. "If it's intelligent, maybe. Some species use fear as a defense mechanism. Others use it as a tool. I didn't like where this was going." "We're not here to make friends with it," I said. "We're here to figure out what it is and how to stop it." Parker nodded. "Morrison's right. We observe, we document, and if it becomes a threat, we neutralize it." That night, we spread out across the property. Collins and 2 others manned the thermal cameras. Dr. Brennan set up electromagnetic field detectors, claiming that unexplained phenomena often disrupted electrical currents. Dr. Foster positioned audio equipment near the barn. I stayed on the porch with Harrison, rifle loaded, eyes on the tree line. The sun set. Darkness swallowed the field, and like clockwork, at 9 p.m., the crickets stopped. This time, the lights appeared from multiple directions. 6 of them, red, glowing, hovering at different heights. They formed a loose circle around the property, each one positioned like a sentry. Dr. Brennan's equipment started going haywire. The electromagnetic readings spiked off the charts. Static filled the radios. The floodlights we'd set up flickered once, twice, then died completely. Parker's voice crackled through the static. "All units maintain position. Do not engage unless threatened." One of the lights drifted closer. Slow, deliberate, stopping just outside the fence. I raised my rifle, tracking its movement. Through the scope, I could see it clearly now. Not just a light. Eyes. Massive, burning red eyes staring directly at me. And below them, a shape. Tall, hunched, covered in dark, matted fur. Its arms were long, too long, hanging almost to its knees. And its mouth, I could see teeth, sharp, jagged, catching the faint moonlight. Harrison whispered, "That's it." That's what looked through my son's window. The creature tilted its head, studying us. It didn't blink, didn't move, just watched. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct told me to fire. But something held me back. Maybe it was training. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe, deep down, I knew that if I pulled that trigger, things would get much worse. Then, from somewhere behind the barn, another scream echoed through the night. This one was different, sharper, almost like a signal. The creature in front of us turned its head slightly, listening, and then, without warning, all 6 lights vanished at once. Silence. Colin's voice crackled through the radio. "They're moving." Southwest corner. Multiple heat signatures, no wait. "They're gone again." Dr. Foster shouted from the barn. "I'm getting audio." Something circling the building. I ran toward her position, Harrison right behind me. When we reached the barn, Dr. Foster stood frozen, headphones on, eyes wide. "It's breathing," she whispered. "I can hear it breathing." I aimed my flashlight toward the back of the barn. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping across the wooden walls. Nothing. Just empty space. But then I heard it too. A deep, rhythmic exhale. Heavy. Close. Coming from just beyond the light. I stepped forward. Slowly, finger on the trigger. The breathing stopped. The air felt thick, electric. And then, from directly above us, something moved. I swung the flashlight up just in time to see a massive shape leap from the barn roof, soaring over our heads and landing 30 feet away in the field. It hit the ground hard, shaking the earth, and then bolted toward the trees on two legs. Harrison fired his shotgun. The blast lit up the night. The creature stumbled, let out a roar that rattled my bones, and kept running. It didn't stop, didn't slow down, just disappeared into the darkness. We stood there, breathing hard, flashlight sweeping the empty field. Dr. Foster pulled off her headphones, hands shaking. "Did you see how it moved?" That was deliberate, calculated. It knew we were listening. Parker ran up behind us. "Anyone hit?" I shook my head. It jumped from the barn roof, cleared 30 feet like it was nothing. Dr. Hayes appeared, notebook in hand, scribbling furiously. Incredible. Bipedal locomotion, advanced spatial awareness, possible use of intimidation tactics. This is unlike anything I've ever documented. I stared at him. "You're taking notes while that thing is out there?" He looked up, eyes bright with excitement. "Sergeant, do you understand what we're witnessing? This could be the discovery of a lifetime." I grabbed his notebook. "This isn't a discovery. It's a threat, and if we don't figure out how to stop it, someone's going to get hurt." The rest of the night was chaos. The lights kept appearing and disappearing. The electromagnetic readings spiked randomly. Audio equipment picked up sounds we couldn't explain. Low-frequency hums, guttural growls, what sounded like whispers. At one point, Collins swore he saw 3 figures standing at the edge of the woods, watching us. But when he aimed his rifle, they were gone. By dawn, we were exhausted. The family hadn't slept, neither had we. Harrison's wife came out of the bedroom, eyes red, voice hollow. "How long?" she asked. "How long do we have to live like this?" I didn't have an answer. Parker tried to reassure her, said we'd increase patrols, bring in more support. But I could see it in her face. She didn't believe him. None of them did. We spent the next day searching the property. The footprints were everywhere now. Near the barn, by the fence, circling the house. Some were fresh, pressed deep into the mud. Others looked older, weathered. Dr. Hayes took casts of the prints, measured the stride length, analyzed the weight distribution. He estimated the creature stood between 7 and 8 feet tall, weighed at least 400 pounds, and had a bone structure unlike any known primate. "It's not a bear," he said, "but not a gorilla. Not human. This is something else entirely." Dr. Brennan had his own theory. The electromagnetic readings suggest a possible interdimensional presence, something that exists partially outside our perceivable reality. That would explain the lack of thermal signature and the sudden disappearances. I looked at him. "Are you saying this thing isn't from here?" He shrugged. "I'm saying nothing about this follows conventional science. And until we can study it more closely, we're just guessing." That night, we tried something different. Dr. Hayes insisted we set up a lure. He brought 3 live rabbits in metal crates, each secured with thick parachute cord rated for 1,200 pounds. He played a recording of rabbit distress calls, a high-pitched squealing that made my skin crawl. The idea was simple. If the creature was hunting, it couldn't resist. We positioned the crates in the open field, 50 yards from the tree line. Then we waited. Hours passed. Nothing happened. The distress calls kept playing on a loop, echoing across the farm. Harrison hated it. "You're calling it here," he said. "You're inviting it." Hayes didn't respond. He just kept watching the field through binoculars. Then at 10 p.m., the red lights appeared. 6 of them again positioned in the trees, watching. They stayed motionless for several minutes. The rabbit screams continued. And then, one by one, the lights blinked out. Collins whispered, "Did they leave?" I shook my head. "They're still out there." We waited. 10 minutes passed. 15, the night was completely silent. No crickets, no wind, nothing. And then, from the darkness, we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving through the field, heading straight toward the rabbit crates. I raised my rifle, peering through the scope. The night vision turned the world green, and there, in the center of the field, I saw it, a massive figure, moving on 2 legs, shoulders hunched forward, arms swinging slowly at its sides. It stopped 20 feet from the crates, tilted its head, and listened. The rabbit screamed again. The creature stepped closer. Its eyes flared red, bright enough to see even without night vision. It reached down, grabbed one of the crates with a single hand, and lifted it effortlessly. The parachute cord snapped like thread. The creature turned the crate upside down, shook it once, and the rabbit fell out, scrambling across the grass. Then, with a speed that defied its size, the creature snatched the rabbit mid-run. There was no struggle, no sound, just a quick motion, and the rabbit was gone. The creature stood there for a moment, holding the crate in one hand, staring directly at us, and then it crushed the metal cage like paper. The sound echoed across the field, a warning. Harrison whispered, "Jesus Christ." The creature dropped the twisted metal, turned, and walked back toward the trees. Not running, not hiding, just walking, like it had made its point. The other lights reappeared, forming a line behind it. And then, all at once, they vanished into the forest. We didn't move for a long time. Finally, Parker lowered his rifle. What the hell was that? Dr. Hayes was already running toward the field. We followed him. When we reached the crates, the scene was worse than I expected. The first crate was empty. The second was untouched. The third was crushed inward, metal bent and twisted, parachute cord snapped clean through. There was no blood, no fur, no sign of the rabbit, just deep impressions in the dirt where the creature had stood. Dr. Hayes crouched down, running his hand over the broken cord. 1,200 pounds, he muttered. It tore through it like nothing. Harrison stared at the crushed cage. It's not just hunting. It's showing off. I couldn't argue with that. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't afraid of us. If anything, we were the ones being studied, being tested. And I had no idea what would happen when those tests were over. We returned to the porch, and Dr. Foster sat down hard, head in her hands. This doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense. Parker pulled me aside. We need to make a call. Either we escalate this, bring in military containment, or we pull out and let someone else handle it. I looked back at the family. Harrison sat on the steps, shotgun across his lap, staring at the empty field. His wife stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around herself. Their sons watched from the window, faces pale. These people had nowhere to go. This was their home, and something had taken it from them. We stay, I said. Until we figure this out, we stay. Parker nodded. Then we better be ready, because I don't think that thing is done with us yet. He was right. That night was only the beginning. Over the next week, the encounters escalated. The creatures, because now we knew there was more than one, started getting bolder. They circled the house at night, scratched at the walls, pounded on the barn doors. The lights appeared every evening, sometimes in the trees, sometimes hovering directly over the property. And the screams, those horrible screams, echoed through the valley every single night. We tried everything: motion sensors, tripwires, floodlights, even loud sirens to scare them off. Nothing worked. They adapted to every defense we put up. It was like they were learning, studying our patterns, figuring out our weaknesses. One night, Collins was on patrol near the barn when his radio died, just went silent. He called out, but no one answered. We found him 10 minutes later, sitting on the ground, back against the barn wall, staring at nothing. He said something had stood behind him, breathing on his neck. He felt its hand on his shoulder, heavy, clawed. But when he turned around, nothing was there. After that, no one wanted to patrol alone. We started moving in pairs, weapons drawn, flashlights sweeping constantly. The farm felt like a war zone, tense, dangerous. Like at any moment, something would break. Dr. Brennan's theory about interdimensional presence started to make more sense. The creatures seemed to exist in two states, visible and invisible. 1 second they were there, glowing eyes, massive shapes. The next second they were gone. No heat signature, no footprints, no trace. It was like they could slip in and out of our reality at will. Harrison's family reached their breaking point. His wife packed bags, said they were leaving, going to her sister's place in Cleveland. Harrison tried to stop her, said they couldn't just abandon their home. But she wasn't listening anymore. "This isn't a home," she said. "This is a nightmare, and I won't let my boys die here." They left the next morning. Harrison stayed behind, alone, stubborn, refusing to let whatever was out there win. I respected that. But I also knew it was only a matter of time before something went wrong. That night, we set up one final test. Dr. Hayes insisted. He wanted to try communication again, this time using light signals, flashing patterns, Morse code. The idea was to see if the creatures would respond. If they were intelligent, maybe they'd understand we weren't a threat. I thought it was a terrible idea. Parker agreed, but Hayes wouldn't drop it. So we let him try. At 9 p.m., the lights appeared, 5 of them, positioned in a half circle around the farm. Hayes stood in the open field with a high-powered flashlight, flashing patterns into the trees. Long blinks, short blinks, repeated sequences. The creatures watched, silent, unmoving. Then, after about 10 minutes, one of the lights blinked back. 3 short flashes. 3 long flashes, 3 short flashes, SOS, the universal distress signal. Hayes dropped the flashlight. "They know," he whispered. "They understand." Before anyone could respond, all 5 lights rushed forward at once, fast, too fast. They closed the distance in seconds, stopping just outside the fence. The creatures behind them became visible, massive, towering, eyes burning. And then they all screamed together. The sound was deafening. It vibrated through my chest, shook the ground, made the windows crack. I covered my ears, dropping to my knees. Harrison fired his shotgun into the air, over and over, until the magazine was empty. The creatures didn't flinch. They just stood there, screaming, staring, daring us to do something. And then, as suddenly as it started, they stopped. The lights blinked out. The creatures vanished. Silence. We stood there in the dark, breathing hard, ears ringing. Hayes sat in the field, trembling. "They're not just intelligent," he said quietly. "They're angry." That was the last night Dr. Hayes stayed on the farm. He packed his equipment and left the next morning, mumbling something about needing to reevaluate his theories. Dr. Brennan left with him. Dr. Foster stayed, but even she looked shaken. "I don't know what to do anymore," she admitted. "We've documented everything. Photos, audio, footprints. But none of it brings us closer to understanding what they want." I looked at her. Maybe they don't want anything. Maybe they're just here. And we're in their way. By the 3rd week, Command finally pulled us out. Too many unexplained incidents. Too many soldiers refusing to go back. They filed the reports, archived the evidence, and declared the case inconclusive. Just like I knew they would. Before we left, I found Harrison sitting on his porch, staring at the woods. "You think they'll come back?" he asked. I didn't lie to him. I don't know, but if they do, you need to leave. This isn't worth dying for. He nodded slowly. I know. I just hoped I'd understand it first. Why us? Why here? I didn't have an answer. Some things don't have answers. Some things just are. We drove away that afternoon. As I looked back in the rearview mirror, I saw the farm disappearing behind the trees, and for just a second, I thought I saw a red glow flickering at the edge of the woods, watching us leave. But what happened in the weeks after we left, that's when things got truly terrifying. Because the siege wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I thought leaving that farm would be the end of it. That once we pulled out, filed our reports, and moved on to the next assignment, the nightmares would fade. I was wrong, because 3 days after we left, Harrison called command. His voice was barely a whisper. They're inside the house. Command patched the call through to me. I was off duty, sitting in my barracks, trying to convince myself that what I'd seen was just stress or exhaustion. But when I heard Harrison's voice, shaking, broken, I knew it wasn't over. Morrison, he said, please, come back. I can't do this alone. I told him to get out, leave the house, drive to the nearest town, stay with someone, anywhere but there. He said he couldn't. His truck wouldn't start. The battery was dead, even though he'd just replaced it. The phone line kept cutting out. And every time he tried to leave, the lights appeared, surrounding him, blocking the driveway, keeping him trapped. I looked at Lieutenant Parker. He shook his head. Command won't authorize it. Case is closed. I grabbed my rifle. Then I'm going on my own. Parker stared at me for a long moment. Then he sighed. I'll drive. We arrived at the farm just after midnight. The driveway was pitch black. No lights from the house. No movement. Just silence. Parker killed the engine, and we sat there for a moment, listening. Nothing. But the air felt wrong, heavy, charged. I stepped out of the Jeep, rifle raised. Parker followed. We moved slowly toward the house, boots crunching on gravel. The front door was wide open, not broken, just open, like someone had invited us in. Harrison, I called out. No response. We entered the house, flashlights sweeping the rooms. Furniture was overturned. Pictures had fallen off the walls. The kitchen table was flipped on its side. But no blood, no signs of struggle. Just chaos. Parker checked the bedrooms. I moved toward the back of the house. That's when I saw him. Harrison sat in the corner of the living room, shotgun across his lap, staring at the back window. He didn't turn when I approached, didn't blink, just stared. Harrison, I said quietly, what happened? He spoke without looking at me. They came through the walls. I glanced at Parker. He shook his head, confused. I crouched down beside Harrison. What do you mean, through the walls? Harrison finally looked at me. His eyes were bloodshot, face pale. I was sitting here. Around 10 p.m., the lights appeared outside like always. I locked the doors, checked the windows. Everything was sealed. And then I heard scratching. Inside the walls, moving, getting closer. He swallowed hard. I fired into the wall, 3 times. The scratching stopped. But when I looked at the holes, there was nothing, just empty space. Parker examined the wall. 3 shotgun blasts had torn through the drywall, but there was no blood, no fur, no evidence of anything, just shredded insulation and splintered wood. They're not physical, Harrison whispered. Not all the time. They shift, change. 1 second they're solid, the next they're smoke. How do you fight something like that? I didn't have an answer. I radioed Collins, told him we needed backup. He arrived 20 minutes later with 2 other soldiers. We set up a perimeter around the house, weapons ready, eyes on the tree line. The lights appeared an hour later, more than before. At least 10 of them, spread across the entire edge of the woods. They didn't move, just hovered there, watching, waiting. Collins whispered, "What are they doing?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but stay sharp." Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, a sound started, low at first, a rhythmic thumping, like a drum, slow, steady, methodical. It echoed through the valley, growing louder with each beat. The lights started swaying in time with the rhythm, back and forth, hypnotic. Parker lowered his rifle. "What the hell is that?" The drumming grew faster, louder. The lights moved closer, still swaying. And then, from the darkness between them, shapes began to emerge. Tall, massive, covered in dark fur, at least 6 of them, walking slowly toward the house in perfect unison, eyes glowing red, mouths open, showing rows of sharp teeth. I raised my rifle. "Hold your fire until I give the order." The creatures stopped 50 feet from the house. The drumming stopped. Silence. They stood there, motionless, staring at us, and then one of them stepped forward, larger than the others, broader shoulders, longer arms. It raised one hand, fingers spread, and pointed directly at Harrison. Harrison stood up slowly, shotgun trembling. "It wants me." I stepped in front of him. "No one's taking you." The lead creature tilted its head. Then it spoke, not in words, but in a sound. A deep, resonating tone that vibrated through the ground. It felt like a question, or a demand. The other creatures joined in, their voices layering over each other, creating a harmony that shouldn't exist. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Dr. Foster's words echoed in my mind. "If it's intelligent, maybe we can communicate." I lowered my rifle slightly, kept my hands visible, and I spoke. "We don't want conflict. If this is your territory, we'll leave. But we need safe passage." The lead creature stared at me. The glowing red eyes dimmed slightly. Then it made another sound, softer, almost sad. It lowered its hand and turned to the others. They exchanged tones, voices rising and falling like a conversation. And then, without warning, they all turned and walked back toward the trees. The lights followed them. One by one, they blinked out. The drumming faded. And just like that, they were gone. We stood there for a long time, not moving, barely breathing. Finally, Collins lowered his weapon. "Did that just happen?" Parker looked at me. "What did you do?" I shook my head. "I don't know. I just talked." Harrison sat down hard on the porch steps. "They understood you." Maybe they did. Or maybe they were just done with us. Either way, that was the last time the creatures appeared on the Harrison farm. The lights never came back. The screams stopped. The scratching in the walls ended. It was like they'd made their point and moved on. We stayed for 3 more days, monitoring the property. Nothing happened. The farm was quiet again, peaceful, almost normal. Harrison started cleaning up, fixing the broken furniture, patching the walls. He didn't talk much, just worked, trying to reclaim his home. Before we left, I asked him if he was going to stay. He nodded. "This is my land. I'm not running anymore." I respected that, but I also knew he'd never feel completely safe again. None of us would. Back at base, I wrote my final report, documented everything. The encounters, the communication attempt, the sudden disappearance. Command read it, filed it away, and told me to forget about it. Classified. Need to know basis. The official stance was that the family had experienced stress-induced hallucinations exacerbated by wildlife activity. Nothing more. But I knew the truth. We all did. What happened on that farm in the summer of 1981 was real. The creatures existed. They were intelligent. And for reasons we'll never fully understand, they chose to leave us alone. Dr. Foster continued her research for years. She published a few papers under pseudonyms, never mentioning the specifics. just theories about unknown species and interdimensional phenomena. Dr. Hayes disappeared from the academic world. Last I heard, he was living somewhere in Canada, still searching for answers. Lieutenant Parker retired 2 years later. We stayed in touch for a while, but eventually lost contact. I heard he moved to Arizona, as far from Ohio as he could get. Collins transferred to a different unit. He never spoke about that summer again. Said it was better to just forget. Maybe he was right. Harrison lived on that farm for another 15 years before finally selling it. He told the new owners it was a peaceful property, good for raising animals. He didn't mention the woods, or the lights, or the creatures. He figured some things were better left buried. The farm changed hands a few more times over the years. I checked in on it occasionally, drove past it on leaves, just to see if anything had changed. It never did. Just a quiet farmhouse surrounded by trees. Normal, boring, like nothing had ever happened there. But sometimes, late at night, when the moon is low and the air feels heavy, people who live in Rome say they see lights in those woods. Red glows drifting between the branches, hovering, watching. And if you listen closely, they say you can still hear the drumming. Faint, distant, like an echo from another time. I've been asked over the years if I think they're still out there, those creatures, watching us, testing us. Honestly, I don't know. Part of me hopes they moved on, found somewhere else to exist. Another part of me, the part that still wakes up at 3 a.m. with my hand reaching for a rifle that isn't there, knows better. They're out there, somewhere. In the shadows between our world and theirs, and maybe that's where they've always been. People ask me if I believe in monsters now. I tell them I believe in things we don't understand, things that exist outside our definitions of reality. The creatures on that farm weren't monsters. They weren't evil. They were just different, operating on rules we couldn't comprehend. In 1983, a researcher named Dennis Pilchis published a book called Night Siege. It documented several cases of unexplained phenomena across Ohio during the early 80s. The Harrison farm was mentioned briefly, though the names were changed and the details sanitized. Most people who read it dismissed it as rural folklore, ghost stories told by bored farmers. But I know different. I was there. I saw it. And 40 years later, I can still remember the way those red eyes looked at me, not with anger, not with hatred, but with something else. Recognition, like they knew exactly what I was, and they were curious. That's what scares me the most. Not that they existed, but that they understood us, studied us, and then chose to leave. Because if something that powerful, that intelligent, decided we weren't worth the effort, what does that say about us? I retired from the Army in 1995, settled down in a small town in Pennsylvania, as far from Ohio as I could manage without leaving the East Coast. I don't talk about that summer. Most people wouldn't believe me anyway. And the ones who would, they don't need to carry that weight. But every now and then, when I'm sitting on my porch at night, watching the tree line, I think about Harrison. About how he stayed on that farm even after everything that happened, how he refused to run, and I wonder if I would have had that kind of courage, or if I would have done exactly what I did, left, moved on, tried to forget. The thing is, you never really forget. You can bury it, ignore it, tell yourself it was just stress or exhaustion. But late at night, when the world goes quiet, and you're alone with your thoughts, it comes back. The lights, the screams, the eyes. And you remember that there are things in this world we will never fully understand. I kept one thing from that summer, a photograph, blurry, overexposed, but you can see them if you know what you're looking for. 6 red lights hovering above the tree line, and in the foreground, barely visible, a massive shape standing at the edge of the field, arms hanging low, eyes burning, watching. I keep it in a drawer. Don't look at it often. But sometimes when I start to doubt what I saw, when I start to think maybe command was right, and it was all just hallucinations, I pull it out. And I remember. It was real. All of it. And somewhere out there, in the darkness between the trees, they're still watching. If you made it this far, you've heard the whole story. The real story. Not the sanitized version in the files or the folklore version in the books. This is what actually happened in the summer of 1981 on a quiet farm outside Rome, Ohio. Do I think it could happen again? Honestly, I think it's happening right now, somewhere, to someone. These things don't just appear once and disappear forever. They're part of our world, even if we don't want to admit it. And every now and then they make themselves known. So if you're ever out in the woods late at night and you see a red glow between the trees, don't assume it's a flashlight. Don't assume it's a reflection. Pay attention, because what you're seeing might be something that's been there all along, watching, waiting, testing. And if it starts moving towards you, run. Don't look back. Don't try to understand it. Just run. Because some things aren't meant to be understood. Some things are meant to remind us that we're not alone in this world. And we're not at the top of the food chain. I learned that lesson in 1981. And I'll carry it with me until the day I die. This is Sergeant James Morrison signing off. Stay safe out there. And remember, the woods are never as empty as they seem. Harrison passed away in 2019. Natural causes. Heart failure. I went to his funeral. Small gathering. Family, a few neighbors. The pastor talked about his dedication to his land, his strength in the face of adversity. No one mentioned what really happened. No one talked about the siege. But as they lowered his casket into the ground, I looked toward the tree line of the cemetery. And for just a second, I swear I saw a red glow flickering between the branches. Just for a second. Then it was gone. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was a reflection. Or maybe, just maybe, they came to pay their respects. To the man who refused to run. The man who stood his ground, even when the world stopped making sense. I like to think it was the latter. I like to think that wherever Harrison is now, he finally has his answers. He finally understands. As for me, I'm still here, still watching the tree line, still remembering, and still wondering if one day they'll come back. Not for Harrison, not for that farm, but for me, to finish whatever test they started all those years ago. And if they do, I'll be ready, rifle loaded, eyes open, waiting, because I learned something that summer. Something the military never taught me. Fear isn't about running from what you don't understand. Fear is about standing your ground, even when every instinct tells you to flee. That's courage. That's survival. And that's the real lesson of the night siege of 1981. This is the end of my story, but it's not the end of theirs. Those creatures are still out there, still watching, still waiting. And one day, maybe they'll come back. Maybe they'll finish what they started. Or maybe they'll just keep watching, keep testing, keep reminding us that we share this world with things we can't explain. Either way, I'll be ready. Will you? If this story resonated with you, if it made you think twice about those strange lights you've seen or those unexplained noises in the night, leave a comment below. Tell me what you've experienced, because you're not alone. And the more we share, the more we understand that these encounters aren't isolated incidents. They're part of something bigger, something we're only beginning to grasp. And if you want more true stories about the unexplained, about the moments when reality cracks and something else bleeds through, you know what to do. Because there are more stories out there, more witnesses, more evidence, and I'll keep sharing them as long as people are willing to listen. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and never assume the darkness is empty. This is Sergeant James Morrison, and this was the Night Siege of 1981.